Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that's been like brought to my attention before. I remember in one of my like classes in undergrad, they were talking about like different fields that like men and women go into, and they talked like my professor was talking about how you don't see a lot of women in certain like in fields such as like programming and stuff because he had said the point of like, well, when women like leave, they have to like there's so much continuous education required that like they have to go back to school and like they're going to be way behind if they decide to stay home. And I just thought it was like kind of a weird point to make about it. And I just remember like walking away from that like, I mean, kinda, but I don't know how much I necessarily agree with that. So I think it's definitely something that's like in the background.
Yeah, I think it's definitely in the background. But like for me personally, I'm the kind of person where I'm like, okay, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. Or like I'll just deal with it when it comes. Like I'm not like, I'm gonna be pregnant in 10 years, I can't have this job or whatever. But I can see how for some women, like she was talking about, that they automatically like count themselves out because they're planning for that. And I was just talking about this with one of my best friends as a pilot, and we were saying how there's like it's such a male dominated field, like there's like no female pilots, and probably because the nature of the work is like being gone for days, like if you have a family, I don't know. So I was like, oh, that kind of would make sense, like there's a family at home. Yeah.
I think that for me, like, I don't know, it's always kind of been a little bit the fact that, like, I don't know, I always kind of consider, like, okay, I kind of want to have a good work life balance, like she mentions. Um, and just like me thinking about, like, okay, how much can I handle? So, kind of just like a few different factors. I don't know, but it's definitely something that I've heard a lot of friends talk about and say like, well, we want to have kids in like 2 or 3 years, so blah blah blah, like planning for that already, which is pretty crazy, but at the same time, like, I'm a planner, so I understand that.
I don't know if you guys saw there was a tweet earlier this week and it kind of relates to it and I thought it was funny. It was like almost broke up. Like I remember when I almost broke up with my boyfriend at 15 because I said I wanted to move to New York to pursue my dream of Broadway and his response was, "Well, New York isn't a great place to raise our children."
Right, I saw that too.
At 15, like just sort of goes to show that people are already thinking about it at a young age.
Yeah, for me, I definitely wouldn't have this type of life experience. But I have an older sister who is 7 years older than me. Yeah, she has experienced this. My nephew is now more than 2 years old. Yeah, yeah, just over the 2 years old. Yeah. So 2 years ago, before my nephew's birth, my older sister, just quit her job about a half a month ahead. Just before my nephew's birth, and then returned to restarted her job 1 year later. Yeah. And as for difficulties, many difficulties, I cannot talk about it one by one. Yeah. Okay, so the second question, how do you understand that a wife is more professional successful than a husband? Such a situation will threaten the marriage. Do you think so or not? Why?
Zinli, can you say your question one more time?
Oh, I'm sorry. How do you understand that a wife is more professional successful than a husband? Such a situation will threaten the marriage.
I think it sort of goes with like what she was talking about when she was saying that like she had her friend who decided to be like a stay-at-home dad. And he was like, you know, a lot of people were like, oh, I respect your decision, but like he was like, I wasn't invited to the same social groups, like I wasn't included in the same stuff. And he's like, it's just like, I don't know, society still hasn't quite supported it the same way, or like it's deemed like, oh, that's kind of like interesting because it's not the norm compared to like what was seen before. And I just found it very interesting.
I feel like even if the husband and wife, the mother and father, are totally comfortable with that, with the woman being the primary, what is it called?
Breadwinner.
Yeah, breadwinner. Even if they're okay with it, I feel like there would be like outside challenges, like from society or friends, like what Tori was just saying, like putting added stress on. Like, I don't know, I'm picturing like, yeah, just normal things where the woman would take over, like after work, getting things ready, and then the husband is like missing out on things, like can't do things with his friend. I don't know. I think it would have added stress just because of how things are already in place.
I think it's so funny how it's depicted on TV most of the time. You know, it's like the mom is like working long hours, disconnected with her kids, and like envious of the father because he's more connected with them. And then dad's like Mr. Mom. I'm thinking of like shows like Parenthood. Right now I'm watching Don't Judge Me. I'm looking for a show. So in the meantime, I'm biding my time with Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. And that's exactly how it's depicted. So I feel like it's a lot of, like in the media puts these people into certain boxes.
Yeah, and she mentioned in earlier chapters too that like the media depicts women who try to have it all as like these totally torn professionals who like fully be present at work but can't really get it together at home either.
Yeah.
And she said that like that's not necessarily the reality, and so it kind of scares a lot of people off. Like, so I thought that was really interesting because like she was like, that's not how it necessarily has to be, but it's how a lot of us think that it would be.
Yeah.
Wait, now that I'm actually thinking of this more, my cousin, who I'm really close with, like, long story short, one summer she had to go to Puerto Rico for her job, and she has 2 kids. They were like 2 and 4 at the time, and so she asked me to like be the nanny for them for the summer, like just have the kids because the husband was always gone for work. And so her husband was already always gone for work, traveling. He worked on like the railroads or something, so he was already always gone. But then as soon as she had to leave for work and go somewhere for her work, people were like, oh my gosh, you're abandoning your kids. Like you're just like leaving them. And really she was just like going to pursue her career and grew like so much from that summer. Like no one batted an eyelash when he had to take off for work. But then when she had to, it's just so many double standards. And she, like people would call her like money hungry.
Yeah, and I love how she's,
you know,
it's like, oh, when I love how she's like, oh, when women watch their kids, it's just like childcare, but when men watch their kids, it's babysitting. I think that's so funny. And total BS.
That's funny that you say that because like I read it, like whenever I read it in the book, I was like, does this actually happen? I guess it's because I'm such like from like such a small town, like nobody really has like big time jobs where they're really like going and doing like super crazy things. So I was like, do people like actually call like others out on things like this? But I guess they do. It just seems like so crazy to me.
I think in this case it all depends, because if a husband doesn't care about he has a wife who are more successful and more money and than him, that's okay. And if you care about that, care a lot about that, and take your wife as your competitor, that would be a question.
yeah, maybe there's like more underlying problems there if you have a problem with your wife making more money than you.
Yeah. So do you want to have a 50-50 partnership with your partner? Oh, your future partner?
This is something that I'm like really passionate about because growing up, like my parents, it was so not 50-50. Like my dad was very much like the good time guy who like we would have family vacations with and stuff. And like my mom was always doing like all the driving and all the cooking and like all the work, all the like real work. And I just really hated that. So I'm hoping that when I have kids, it'll really be 50-50. But it's also interesting because like they mention how you like it has to be stuff that the other person like is motivated to do, because then you don't just want to be the wife that's like bossing your husband around. So I feel like that's going to be a challenge, is like finding things. Like I'm always yelling at Gabe to make the bed, and like he'll do it sometimes, but like I know he wouldn't do it if I didn't like say something about it. So it's just a matter of like finding tasks that you're motivated to do. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent a little bit.
I definitely agree. Like I definitely want 50-50. I think it would just be like miserable to like go to work all day and then come home and be like doing every single thing like around the house. It just like made me think of like my parents. Like I don't know if I would consider it like a 50-50, maybe like a 75-25, because my dad is like my mom like definitely does the like womanly jobs like around the house, like she's the one doing the cleaning and stuff like that, but my dad does like a lot more of like the handiwork and stuff. Like if I needed like something like done with my car, like my dad knows how to do like everything to fix my car and does like all of like that kind of stuff around the house. I wouldn't say he doesn't like do anything, but like it's definitely not like the mopping the floors, doing the dishes, like doing the laundry, stuff like that.
It is something, yeah, I definitely want a lot of 50-50. And it's kind of interesting because, yeah, once again, sort of reflecting on my own experience, like my mom was for pretty much since I was in like first or second grade was like a part-time teacher. So she had summers off and like was very like wide, or usually like her schedules didn't like or coincided very nicely with ours. And my dad, just due to the nature of his job, works like 50 hours a week or so. So like he was just, I felt like the only times I ever saw him were like towards the evening and then on the weekends. And like, yeah, that's fine and everything. But like during the summer, I've definitely felt like a lot closer with my mom than with my dad, just because of the nature of the time I spent with her. So I think it's kind of interesting. But like, I know that's kind of hard to plan, but I'd like it to be at least a little more balanced that way.
I feel like 50-50 sounds nice in theory, but I feel like I don't know any relationship where I've actually seen it like exactly 50-50. Like of all people in my life, or cousins or friends or aunts and uncles, I feel like it's always going to be like a little bit like skewed. So I don't know. I'm like, I will just be a single mom on my own and do everything on my own, because I don't know. 50-50 sounds nice, but like the story she said about like how she was pregnant, or when she delivered her baby, and then she was on crutches. So like from the start, the husband had to like kind of take over that first week and like feed the baby at night and things like that. Like that's a perfect example where I feel like if she wasn't on crutches, if it was just normal, immediately, like that first week, it's not 50-50, but the mom's getting up, breastfeeding, like doing so from the start. Like I think women give more once they have kids.
Yeah, probably from majority of females' perspective, they would agree on to have a 50-50 partnership. But from my view, these are different. Okay, so next, let's move on. Do you think who will provide primary child care for a child? Mother or father or both? My opinion is that especially when a child is very young, in the infant periods, mother usually, devote more time and energy to raise infants, and with the child get older and older, probably over 2 years old, probably become the toddler and the teenager. probably at this time, both parents are equally important during a child's growth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. As the kid gets older, that it kind of equalizes, becomes more like, especially I'm thinking like sixth grade, like junior high, and I don't know. Yeah, once the kid's older.
We just kind of experienced this because my husband got furloughed right when Charlie's school closed down. So it just kind of like naturally happened where he took over, and I kept working like very normal business hours, you know, like 9 to 5. And it was great for me. I mean, I was super grateful, and that I wasn't trying to like do any sort of work and watch a 3-year-old at the same time. And I think it was really nice for them too. Like they got to kind of bond, and they had their own like little routines, and I was like kind of the outsider, and then I didn't understand the routines exactly, and I was like totally fine with that because I was getting to work 8 hours a day, you know. I wonder, yeah, if the pandemic will kind of shift some of those cultural norms based on who is working at home or going into the office, or the nature of the work that they're able to do at home or not.
Yeah, I was wondering that, like, with the upcoming school year, so many people, like, should we send the kids back to school? Should the kids stay home? And I just wonder, like, if the kids are going to stay home, if one parent is going to have to sacrifice, I don't know what parent would. I would not want to be making those decisions.
I remember talking about that, like, with my mom, and we were talking about just how the role of like taking like a work from home day will change. And like, so yeah, if your child is sick, like before you would just sort of take the day off and like call it quits. But like now, because we were talking about that, like, well, maybe they're going to look more favorably on the work from home option and see that, like, you know, you can get work done in that amount of time, and like it's a viable option for people, like rather than just taking a full day off.
Okay, let's move on. How do you see a father's role in children's growth? I have already mentioned that. Yeah.
In what?
I mean, how do you see a father's role in a child's growth? Yeah.
Child's growth.
Yeah.
I like to think it's equally as important between mom and dad. And I really like what she says about how, like, yes, biologically, like, the mom is, you know, supplying literally the baby's first food for like a year and that kind of thing. But I thought it was very interesting that how she mentioned, like, oh, there are tons of instances where we've gone against biology, and that this could be one of them. And I thought that was really an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think obviously fathers play as much as a role in our growth and development as mothers, but I just think that their roles just look differently than the moms.
Yeah, I was talking with one of my friends, I think last week, and she was saying she has an almost 2-year-old, and she was saying it's kind of funny because like when she is like taking care of him, like she has her nephew over, and like he's hanging out, and like they're hanging out with like her parents, like the kid's grandparents, and so he's like it's a lot of like fun time. But then when her son goes over to his dad's house because they co-parent, he's just like alone by himself. And so every time she's like, it sucks because like whenever I drop him off, like he starts sobbing because he's like, I don't want to go. And she's like, I can't really discredit him, like my house is a lot more fun, but it just kind of stings because it's like, no, he needs this. I'm like, yeah, like your father really wants to spend time with you, like it's awesome. But she's like, it's just so hard. I'm like, no, I can't blame you there, like that does sound very difficult.
I liked another story that I liked was about the couple who the baby like always wanted to be comforted by the mom, but they just like basically got through this hard time of like adapting to allow the baby to be comforted by dad too, and it like really paid off. I thought that was really an interesting story because like it's just a matter of like getting used to it.
So yeah, father's role is also important. Yeah, even in the when child is very small, yeah, child care. So, do you think men should be more empowered at home? If you do, how would you empower your partner? I mean, in the child care.
I definitely think they should. I'm trying to think of like how exactly. I think the story Georgia was talking about is a good example of just like trying to incorporate it more. And like, while it might not be the easy choice, yeah, like when your child is crying, making sure that like you're trying to incorporate it, because I think that's like another way to help them feel empowered.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes women or mothers, they want to be like, they can be like overbearing and not let the father like try to take the lead or take control or like try his way of handling the situation. So maybe instead of like jumping in first and like going about it your way, like empowering your partner to feel comfortable enough to like do it his way.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting and so like applicable to so many couples because I'm a total like control freak, and while I try not to be bossy, I definitely am. So that would definitely be something that's a challenge for me, but I feel like it is so much more encouraging if you're just kind of left to your own devices, like an equal adult who's like equally capable. That's just like more motivating to actually do it.
Georgia, I'm like the same way kind of whenever I was reading the part about like I just feel like once I like get going like a certain way, I'm like, okay, this is how it needs to be done. Like how she was saying like the diaper thing, like changing the diaper, like as long as the diaper like is on the baby, like it doesn't matter how it got there. But I feel like I would be like still like, oh my god, like you're doing it wrong, and just like trying to like get like past that, like, okay, this is fine. Like their way is also fine, like the baby is fine.
Yeah, okay. So next question. Is there anyone you know who role as a stay-at-home father, and how people around him see him?
So my mom, like when she was a teacher, she would have like parents would come in and help assist. And she had, I think, one or two stay-at-home dads. And I remember she was always just like, that's so cool. Like I love the fact that like they're doing that. And so she thought very highly of it, but I just found that kind of cool.
I personally don't think I know any stay-at-home dads. It's kind of crazy not to think about.
I don't either now that I try and think about it.
One of my roommates who goes to SLU Med, her dad was the stay-at-home dad. I don't really know like too much about it. I think her mom might be a doctor or something. And then when Gabe and I were doing one of the older couples that was kind of like leading it, the dad was like a stay-at-home dad, and I thought that was really interesting because it was like a very like Catholic marriage prep, and so I don't know, it was kind of like untraditional, but like in a good way. I really liked it, and they said that it just worked out great. Like just it's just what their family, it just made sense for their family to do, and they said it went really smoothly. I mean, for the most part.
Know any stay-at-home like dads personally, except for through my cousin, the kids that I would watch, like her best friend Mary is like a huge big time like realtor, like boss woman, like amazing, and her husband is like the stay-at-home dad, and I guess it like works amazing for them. But yeah, it's like my third cousin twice removed or something. I don't know any stay-at-home dads.
Okay, yeah, I think if necessary, father to stay at home to do the childcare job, is good as well. Yeah, anyway, but sometimes, always we expect a man should be more professional, more successful in their career, and more money anyway. Yeah.
And like, what do you feel like are the Chinese cultural norms? Is it fairly common for the dad to stay at home ever?
It's a good question. Yeah, I will talk it. Yeah, and this is another question I will ask. Yeah, things are very similar in this aspect. Like what said in the chapter 8, people, especially for a man, a father, they always just focus on their job and just do a very little childcare job. Instead, a mother will primarily focus on the stay at home to focus on the childcare job, especially when a child is very young, as an infant. Yeah. So my last question is like this. I will tell you what the situation in China. Most of the cases like this. When a child is very small, I mean just less than 2 years old, parents will primarily responsible for the child care, especially mother. Probably mother will just stay at home to quit a job and stay at home to do child care job every day. And father are responsible for the money to support the family. Yeah. So probably after 2 years later, the child get older and older, older than 2 years old, even go to the toddler years. And at this time, the child care responsibility will be shifted to the grandparents, either the father's parents or the mother's parents. Yeah. So it is very prevalent in China, probably accounting for 95% of cases. Grandparents will bear the responsibility of child care. Yeah. And young parents can just focus on their job and more money, yeah, and more money to support the family. Yeah, that's the situation. So what's your opinion? What's your comment about these cases? And what's the basic situation in America? Yeah.
I think that's super interesting. I think it's a great way to sort of connect the generations, so that way that like you can still sort of have that like sense of, or like parents can return to their jobs and not really feel guilty about it, but at the same time, like I'm sure the grandparents love it because they get to spend like time with their grandkids, and that would just be really cool. So I think that's a really interesting way to do it.
Yeah, my sister has a baby. So my nephew is 1.5, and my mom is looking at retiring like by the end of this year or next year. She like wants to retire so badly. And me and my siblings keep being like, what are you going to do with all your time off? You're going to be so bored, blah, blah, blah. She's like, no, I'm just going to watch Quincy all day. Like she's already planning on once she retires, she just wants to like watch her grandbaby all day because she's so crazy obsessed with him. So I think that is like really interesting, but I think like that it would be a lot. That's a big role for someone to take on. Is to like you've already parented your own children, and then to do it again with your grandchildren, it's a big task.
I'm like kind of seen this firsthand. Like both of my nieces, some of you guys know this, some of you don't. I have 2 nieces that are almost the same age. They're like a month apart, and like one lives 3 hours away. So obviously my parents don't watch her, but my parents watch my other niece that lives at home, is also 3. So it's just kind of like interesting to like see the dynamic like between my like parents and my like niece that's like up north, and then like my parents with my niece here. But yeah, like I definitely agree, it's kind of like a big responsibility. Like my mom still she's always done like home health care, so she can like take Savannah with her to work, so it like works out, but it's like a really flexible schedule. But with that too, just like a side tangent, it's kind of funny because I mean, like my mom goes into nursing homes, so my niece goes into these nursing homes. My niece is like way more comfortable around like old people than she is like young people. Like she'll be at a park and there'll be like a grandma and like her grandson, and she like pays no attention to like the grandson, but she'll like go like sit on the grandma's lap like it's her own grandma.
I'm just imagining her like chatting with like these older ladies.
Oh yeah, that's definitely Savannah. But then like my mom, you know, she does her thing, and my dad's like off work on Fridays, so my dad watches her on Fridays. But yeah, it's kind of like a second role that they've like taken on, but they like absolutely love it.
Any other
I think it's fairly common in St. Louis too, because so many people seem to kind of return here and stay close to family. Like I feel like it's very, very common for people to have lots of family that live nearby versus like somewhere like, you know, New York or LA, where it's less common to have or like to be from there and to stay there for your adulthood, you know. So I think it kind of depends on where you are, where you're living, and if it's realistic.
Be amazing to have though, free childcare.
That's my sister literally says that to my sister all the time. She's like, well, you need to spend more on mom and dad's like gifts because they watch Savannah all the time and you don't have to pay for childcare every week.
Okay, and that's all questions for today. Yeah. Anything else?
How do you guys like the book so far? You're almost done, right?
Yeah.
Couple more
I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a very interesting, just like reflection on it. And it's definitely interesting too, hearing it from someone who's very much in like the business tech side of it, because
Yeah.
I feel like that's a very different like scenario than dietetics. So I like sort of comparing and contrasting and seeing like what is the same and what's different.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, thanks for letting me join, guys. It's good to hear your conversation on this one.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll leave you guys and let you wrap up. See you on Tuesday.
Bye. Bye. All right.
Okay.
So
Anything else?
I'm hosting next week, so is 5:30 good for everyone?
It's okay.
Or 5 or 5:30, either one.